You're listening to Music Ed Tech Talk, a show about music, education, technology, and the intersections between them, with a special focus on the productive and creative process. I'm your host, Robby Burns. Support me on Patreon. You can go to patreon.com/musicedtechtalk. You can join my Discord community where you can talk with me and others about music, education, technology, and more. It's one of the many perks you get for supporting the show. Check it out. Look at all the different tiers and perks that you can get, and I really appreciate your support. Making podcasts is not free. Thanks to this week's Patreon supporters, Cynthia, Eric, and Ayler. You should check out his blog, mrayler.com. It's spelled like this, mrehler.com. He writes about a lot of topics that are consistent with what we talk about on the show. You can read about what he's doing with technology and music there. With me today is David MacDonald. David, what's up?
You know, it's summer now, so very little.
Yeah, well, that's kind of the idea behind today's topic. So I've had a lot of topics that are like sort of just adjacent to music, education, or technology, but are not like a super synergistic like combination of the three. I mean, today I want to talk a little bit about smart speakers and their assistants, and I don't feel necessarily like this is the most pedagogical topic, but I do still I'm going to first just say, like, I thought it'd be valuable to do some fun, loose summer topics that are adjacent to the normal flow of the show. But I also do feel like this topic connects in some ways, and I have prepared a statement.
You have an opening statement?
Well, I just like an intro, if anything. I mean, so summer fun stuff is a valid enough reason. This is my show. I talk about what I want to. But I think like of all of the sort of, like in the last year, we worked from home a lot, right? Like our home kind of became our place of work for many of us. And I interacted with like a lot of my smart home tech a lot more than ever before, because it was like actually now all of my smart home tech was actually like work tech. So speakers specifically of all of my home tech deal with music, which is what this show is about. I thought on the one hand, like if listeners are engaging with any smart home tech, it's probably like speakers are one of them. And all of these speakers today come with these, smart assistants that you can talk to and make them do your bidding. And I thought that it was worth sort of bundling this topic of sort of like comparing these assistants as they run on smart speakers, and then sort of just talking about my smart home setup and how I can get these different products to or not to talk to one another and, do my will by playing me sweet, sweet music around my house/office of the past year.
And it's interesting. I've never thought of the speaker function of those to be very integral to my like teaching or musical practice. That's just around the house stuff. I'm curious to know how you're using your fancy smart speakers to further your teaching in any way.
Well, I mean, like I said, it connects loosely. I mean, so on one hand, you could say that these different assistants that run on these speakers are also the same assistants that run on our computers and our phones, and that do other kinds of productivity tasks other than just play music and turn on the lights. So I feel like understanding these assistants and their features actually does have kind of a productivity angle too,
sure,
which I'm happy to build on in future episodes. But yeah, I mean, then more broadly, I wouldn't say that I'm doing much work specific stuff with them as much as I am just getting them to play me music, so that I am fiddling with my phone less to play music, which lets me enjoy more music, which lets me, develop, edify my mind, Like I said, loosely related, but yeah, I mean, I feel like this should be fun because I have kind of like, I got like a little toe in each of the major platforms. I've got some Amazon stuff in the house. I've got some Apple stuff. I've got some Google stuff. And then I have Sonos stuff, which is sort of platform agnostic, but also in various ways plays nicely or not with the other three big tech companies and their products. So I guess like the best thing for me to do is to just, explain?
That's a lot of ecosystems that are all overlapping one another.
So it started when, the first of these like smart things was the Amazon Echo. And we, I think like I don't know, like Christmas of 2016 or something, like, you know, my mom got me the original Echo or something to that effect. And, you know, it was fun to, like, we had like a smart plug and some Philips Hue smart lights, and it was great to do things like, you know, you could plug the Christmas tree into the smart plug and say, create a scene like, hey, Echo, it's Christmas, and then it would play a Christmas playlist, turn on the tree, and turn off the lights. This kind of level of stuff. And as more products have entered the scene, these can do more to talk to your computing devices and link to other services and smart home devices that can, make you more efficient. So we started to we got a couple of the Amazon Echo Dots following that speaker, but none of them were really good speakers. We were using pretty much like a Sonos. My first I guess I have to call the Echo a smart speaker, but like my first smart speaker that I bought with the intent of like listening to music was a Sonos product. And then we got eventually a play bar for our living room TV. But you can already start to see like there's a little bit of fragmentation here because like the Amazon products, there's an Amazon Echo app that you install and you can like run your whole smart home through that app. You can even integrate your Sonos speakers into it. You can even, I learned yesterday while doing some research for this, you can even group Sonos speakers with Amazon Echo speakers and have them play the same audio stream, but only if the Echo is the starting point of the audio. So this is like already one of the things that I'm going to talk about numerous of these kinds of quirks in today's episode, like things where it's like, okay, I've got this thing, and they're each offering me something that I want, but how do I get them to play nicer? Well, in this case, it's like, okay, if you're living in the Amazon ecosystem entirely and your only primary voice assistant is, hey, Amazon, I'm going to not say the actual key phrase.
We need to make an arrangement. Like, what is the fill-in key phrase that we're going to use for all of these?
I've always liked lady in a can, but now it's like not necessarily a gendered thing.
Right.
They've like removed that kind of idea from the system.
I think it's super problematic that the default on all of them from the very beginning has been a white woman's voice.
Yeah, yes, for sure.
I like Tube Friend.
That's good.
Hi, Tube Friend.
A lot of these things are more spherical shaped these days. So like my recent, my recent one has been like person in a ball. What are we going to agree on? I replace the prep phrase with yo instead of hey, because like
we can do that. We can use yo friend.
But here's the problem: it doesn't work for Amazon. The Amazon one, and I might be able to actually customize this, but it does not require like a hey or a are you listening kind of a setup. It's just like you invoke the name of the assistant, which is Alexa, and hopefully I didn't. Nope, it heard me. Did it hear me? We can talk about this later in the episode.
Is that your Amazon robot on your ceiling?
Yes, this is the thing. Is like, I don't know if I want to get into this yet, but we can certainly touch on this topic later, that you can get Amazon and Google inside of other products that are not actually made by Amazon and Google. So you are looking this. I am not joking right now when I tell you that my Amazon product that is down here in the studio is a smoke detector that is not only has smart smoke detector features, but has Amazon built into it and is an AirPlay 2 speaker.
That's pretty good.
It's pretty good. Yeah, it's a good, so if you're looking for a smart smoke detector, I'll put it in the show notes, the brand that it is. And, it works. I've like overcooked some steak and it works really reliably. And so I'm a fan.
All right.
So yeah, I guess let me back up to more of the basics, since that's like getting the assistance in third-party products is a sort of a later topic. But I guess the bottom line is this.
I think there's a lot of good stuff you can do without adding a ton of stuff onto the basic robot devices.
The best
your Echoes, your HomePods, your Nest thing is.
Actually, this is my advice to anyone who really wants to go into this space: is if you want. Like, I'm an edge case, and I want my stuff to always do more. And sometimes the Amazon product might do one cool thing that I really want. So I'll just, have one of those in a room. Or in my case, the Sonos speakers have it built in. So I sort of get a little bit more coverage or range from some of these assistants across my house than I actually do own products made by those companies. So the smartest thing you can do if you want to go into this space is really just decide on what smart speaker ecosystem you want, because the smartest thing to do for you to make your speakers feel smarter is to actually just stick to an ecosystem. And I know a lot of people who are really happy with Amazon being that ecosystem. They were first to market. They do a really great job marketing their speakers. I think that they don't sound the best, and they don't really play nicely with any automation that happens on the device level, so like my phone. and so this is just where my Apple bias comes in. I really like most of my home automation to be handled in the Apple ecosystem because those are the computing products that I use. And I also think that of all of these different major companies, Apple has the least bad home app where you can like organize all of your smart stuff in the house.
It's a very low bar.
It's super low. We can compare the apps themselves later if there's time. But so my thing is like this: if you're an iPhone user and you use Apple Music, I feel like pretty safe saying that if you're just looking for basic home audio and home control, and for your smart thing to do the same things that Siri on your phone and your iPad and your watch can do, I can't recommend more. Just getting some HomePod minis. They're $100 each. It's a super reasonable entry point.
I think for $100 they sound pretty good. And so I have in my, and I will say also to contrast Robby, I am a renter, so I cannot install something like a smart smoke detector or even a smart thermostat in my apartment. But I, like Robby, started out with Amazon things. I have a couple of Echo Dots, and I have an Echo, whatever the jumbo Echo is, Echo Plus maybe, from the first generation Echo Pluses. And they're fine, and I still use them occasionally, but mostly I have HomePod minis around my apartment, and they sound pretty good. I also, for me, one of the things that I appreciate the most about them is that they are AirPlay 2 speakers, which means that they're very easy to send audio from anything that I'm doing on my phone to them. You can connect Echo products to your phone as an audio output, but either the app that you're using needs to connect directly to the Amazon thing, or you need to use Bluetooth, and that's just a pain in the butt if you use any other Bluetooth devices, or if you ever want to play audio from a different device to your Echo. Changing the thing that the Bluetooth connection is connected to is a real pain. So I have mostly transitioned to my HomePod minis using AirPlay 2, but I still do have Echoes hanging around for a couple of things, and we can maybe talk about that at some point as well.
Sure. So since I've just kind of touted the HomePod, and you what you just said is leading to kind of a really kind of, it's like a deep and nerdy, but also kind of sticking point for these products, especially the Apple stuff, because I think what you're highlighting is a strength of Apple products, but also maybe a weakness, which I'll get to, is like the Apple products are the least good at playing nice with internet-connected services. Meaning,
yes,
like, you're getting a great experience if you use Apple Music and if you have Apple products. But if you're a little more open, or you're like a diehard Spotify user or some other streaming app, you really might want to consider Google or Amazon. But I would still recommend that you don't do what I did, which is have all three brands of stuff in your house. Because for me,
I have a Google Nest blob thing sitting in a closet somewhere that I got for free. I did not find it as useful as the other products that I have, only because I didn't notice that it did anything significantly better than the Amazon things that I have around already. And, I already have the Amazon thing set up the way I like.
I mean, so for me, the Amazon and the Google, they're both good at connecting to other products and services. So there are going to be more smart home products and third-party speakers that are going to easily be controlled by your Echo and your Google and like Nest, whatever kind of Google smart speaker you have products. And then they have some compelling features of their own. Like, the Amazon is the only thing that can order me stuff from Amazon, from me speaking. I actually use that a lot. I really do. And it's nice to have one in the kitchen to receive that command. We have one of the Google things with a screen, which you don't think you need until it's like all of a sudden you ask for a chicken timer to start, and you ask for an asparagus timer to start, and you see both timers on the screen without having to constantly ask it how close you are. That thing can also serve up cute photos of our kid. It tells me what I have going on in my day without me even speaking to it in the morning. It recognizes me by face. Maybe that's creepy, but it just all of a sudden pulls up some personal information. The fact that it has a screen means this is a Chromecast product, so I can just easily take YouTube or Disney Plus or HBO and just stream it to that. And this is kind of where the internet-connected skill is important, to the feature ecosystem of Google and Amazon, because Apple products, all of their HomePods really can only do things that you're managing and processing on the iPhone.
Right.
Whereas like Google and Amazon will actually integrate, like you can log into your, for example, your Disney Plus account right from within the Google Home app. And then it's just a linked thing. You can tell your Google to run, show me the latest episode of The Mandalorian in my dining room, and it'll go straight to the thing. Whereas with the iPhone, it's like actually jumping through all those hoops on device. So it's just a different kind of attitude. For a while, Apple had tighter security around what kinds of home products could work with their home app. So for a while, people were not really integrating with Apple's thing. Now it's a lot better. But I still find that like a product is more likely to be able to be linked up to an Echo or a Google Nest product. So,
and not just a product, but a service. The main two things that I still use, there's I guess three things that I still use my Amazon tube for. Mostly they're in the kitchen. One, I like the default weather report that I get when I ask the Amazon thing for the weather a little bit better, though. Now that I have Carrot Weather set up on my phone, if I ask the Apple thing, it will give me the Carrot Weather report, which is still pretty good, and you have a little bit more control there. But anyway, the weather report in the Amazon robot is very good. The other things that I like are the multiple timers that you mentioned, and you can name them, and I don't have a screen, but it will say, hey, your asparagus timer is done at the end of it, instead of just blooping. But the other thing that I really like is the AnyList integration. You mentioned that the Amazon products were kind of first to market, at least in a kind of a wide, large market kind of way. The Amazon, I almost said the robot's name, the Amazon skills for that robot are, I think, some of the best. There are some that are dumb, but I think because they were earliest, it was one of the things that people got into the quickest. They seem to be pretty easy for developers to hook into. And so I use AnyList on my phone to take care of my grocery list and other lists of things that I need to check off. And when I am, making breakfast in the morning and I use the last of the eggs, I can say, hey, Amazon friend, add eggs to my grocery list, and it will not put it on my Amazon shopping list, which is not what I want. It will not put it, if I said that same thing to the Apple robot, it would put it in my iPhone reminders list, which I don't use. But if I say that to the Amazon friend and I have the AnyList skill set up on Amazon, then it will automatically put it on the AnyList app on my phone. And, if you cohabitate and share a grocery list with other people and you use the AnyList app and it syncs to their phones, then it'll be on their phones if they go to the grocery store. Or if they're the one that uses the last of the eggs, they can say, hey, robot, put eggs on my grocery list, and it'll be on your phone. And it happens pretty instantly. Like I've done this, like looking at the list on my phone just as a test and talk to the Amazon friend, and it takes a second and a half before it shows up on my phone. It's pretty amazing.
Super reliable. And just to contrast this with the Apple way that this would happen is you can do this on a HomePod now. But
it's so clunky. I hate it.
And here's why. Here's how it works is you don't actually log into AnyList and you don't log into your credentials using any kind of HomePod or Apple Home app. Instead, what you do is you set up a shortcut locally on your phone, and you do this in the Shortcuts app. And the shortcuts are pretty easy to set up. Like the AnyList app, for example, will offer you some things. It'll say, hey, do you want the to grocery list, yo Siri, add to grocery list, to add something to your AnyList grocery list. And if you set up that shortcut and then you invoke the Siri phrase that you have designated as the AnyList one, then you can ask a HomePod speaker to add something to your list, but it's actually doing it on the phone, even though the HomePod is the thing receiving the command.
And it takes two steps. You have to say, hey, Apple robot, add something to my grocery list. And it says, okay, what would you like to add to your grocery list? And then you tell it. You can't do it all in one step.
What you're hinting at, or maybe not hinting at, but I'll just add this since you reminded me of it, that we don't have too much time to rip on Siri, but Siri sometimes just will be great, and then other times you'll ask it the same exact thing in the same way 8 times, and you'll get maybe 3 or no different, in some cases no results, but you'll maybe get 3 different responses from it.
Yeah, we can talk more about that when we talk about the integrated hardware things. But
Yeah.
I find I have a lot of problems with Siri on that front.
The Amazon products are you have to talk to them more like a command line. Like it will not smartly interpret your natural language in the same way that Siri will. You have to say things very, very exactly, but I do find that it is faster and more consistent in interpreting you when you do say the correct thing. And now this is kind of a trick here because, one of my other challenges with the Amazon stuff is while it is good for that reason, I have found that these services, or they call them skills, that you link into it are hit or miss in terms of like, not only can I remember the exact phrase I need to say, but does it consistently work? The AnyList skill is great, but like I have a Dyson like little heater fan cool thing in our bedroom, and like first of all I can hardly ever remember what phrase to say because when I try to tell it to change the temperature it thinks it's looking for a thermostat in our bedroom, which we don't have one in the bedroom. So if it's like, yo Amazon, tell the Dyson hot and cool to turn on fan to level 3. Like it's just some like really long crazy thing. Whereas with my HomePods, I'm just like, yo Siri, set the temperature in this room to this amount of degrees, or even something as simple as like, hey, yo Siri, I'm cold, and then it will automatically just figure out the room that device has been designated to, and then raise the heat. So those are just kind of some things that are worth mentioning. I guess in terms of like interpreting the human voice, Google is absolutely the best at this because they're leveraging their search engine smarts to, just make sense out of whatever kind of silly phrasing or wording you might use. And this is another reason why you don't think you want a screen on your smart speaker until you say, like the other day, I was talking about having a conversation about personality tests with a friend, as one does. And they were like, we were talking about the Enneagram, and they were like, what's the Enneagram? And I said, yo, Google, what's the Enneagram? And then not only did it like give me a real good answer, which was like from the first paragraph of like, some website, I think the Enneagram Institute, it like read me the first paragraph of their website, but then it showed a Google image result of the Enneagram, which is, I don't know if any people who know the Enneagram, but it's basically sort of like a diagram with like sort of a circular diagram with like 9 points around it and then lines that connect those different points. And the image was like right there. And I was like, this is cool that, we have this interactivity here. So, yeah, I guess though, like you benefit from living in just one of these systems. I think for me, the challenge is that the best sounding system that's made by a big tech company is the Apple HomePod. And if you want more, you've got to go with something like Sonos, which is yet another third party. So can I talk about Sonos?
Yeah, I want to hear about how you're using Sonos.
Okay, so Sonos is its own ecosystem. So like how there's like an Apple Home app, a Google Home app, and a Alexa Home app, the way I have actually set up all of my smart home stuff in rooms and with scenes separately in all three of those apps because sometimes I just like to tinker. And while I primarily use the Apple Home app, it's nice to have some commands set up. Like for example, my robot vacuum cleaner, just for whatever reason, I have hacked it to work with Apple HomeKit, but it works natively with the Amazon and Google products. So sometimes I just like to tell my Google thing to send the vacuum home to its base. So these apps are all kind of set up distinctly. Well, then there's sort of this other player, which is Sonos, and they are known for just making internet connected speakers, and they sound good. They are reliable. They integrate with as many of the features of your computing devices and third-party internet-connected services as I think they possibly can. So here, what I like about them is kind of what you were talking about, before, sort of like, for me, all my smart home things I try to have be as widely integrated with as many services and apps as I possibly can. So, for example, if I buy a smart fan, I'm going to make sure that it works with Google, Apple, and Amazon home apps because I want that flexibility. Well, with Sonos, it's sort of its own app to manage the speakers, and like these other things, you kind of connect your different music services to it. So, like you log into Apple Music, Spotify, Audible. You log into them all within the Sonos app, and then you play from within it. Now, here's my issue with this: is the Sonos speakers, they're definitely charging you a premium, but like a lot of nice things, they're putting a pretty bow on it. Like they're making a real good balance between sound, a product that sounds good, has lots of features, is reliable, and looks real sharp in your house. They know that they can put a higher price tag on that. But to me, they're amongst the best sounding speakers in our house, and they connect to all these different services. So not only can you log in your Apple Music, your Spotify, all of these things, but they also have like hardware features like AirPlay 2, for example. So you could feasibly use Sonos and HomePods in the same speaker groups, which you cannot really easily do. Like I said earlier, you can have, if you tell your Echo to start the music, you can have it linked to some Sonos products and some other third-party speakers. But if I'm on my phone, my iPhone, and I want to AirPlay my audio to a HomePod, I can set up all of my Sonos speakers can be in the same group as the HomePods. So it almost treats them like they're HomePods that just don't have Siri built in. The only thing, and this is where things start to get real quirky, is that Sonos is its own app. So you're kind of like managing your music in two separate places. So you can't, like, if you're going to use AirPlay, you can go to the Apple Music app and basically just say, hey, send this to my HomePod in the dining room, my Sonos whatever in the sunroom, and then my Sonos this in the living room. But what a HomePod can do, and this is where I'm going to try to explain this as best as I can without getting too technical. But basically, you can go to the control center, which is in the upper right corner of your phone's screen. You swipe down from there, and then you can set the outputs of your phone's audio stream to whatever speaker group you want. But if you're using Apple Music and only Apple Music, you can actually have a HomePod be the source of the audio, which means that the music that's streaming to all of your HomePods and Sonos speakers is actually streaming directly from, like, basically one of your HomePods is beaming Apple Music straight to it, and then it's beaming it straight out to your other AirPlay 2 speakers, which is really useful if, I want to watch a YouTube video on my phone or a TikTok or something without it like blasting to the whole house. Or if I go for a walk and my wife is at home, the music doesn't stop because it's just coming straight from the internet. So this is obviously a good thing, but it just gets a little tricky because I've had a lot of AirPlay 2 issues. I'm not sure if there are issues with my internet connection here or issues with Sonos having correctly developed AirPlay 2 into their products, but I have a lot of drops when I try to AirPlay, and it's super frustrating. So what I often do is just go straight to the Sonos app, go to, find my Apple Music library from within the Sonos app, and then play what I want to play. And it's like 100 times more reliable in the connection to the stream. It's just kind of unfortunate because then I can no longer control it from my phone's lock screen or control center. And I furthermore am not getting the benefit of any of those. I'm not using Apple Music to control that Apple Music app to control the stream. I'm using the Sonos version of it. So I don't know.
Is it different if you go into the control center thing and tap control other speakers and TVs? Is that a different thing from controlling it in the Sonos app?
So yeah.
Because I just did that now, and I'm getting this completely ridiculous thing where it's telling me that on my phone I'm listening to a podcast. In the bathroom, HomePod Mini is listening to one song. My kitchen HomePod Mini is listening to a different song. Which, by the way, the touchscreen on the top of the HomePod is very annoying if you have like cats. So like my cat will like brush up against the top of the HomePod Mini, and then it started playing this completely bonkers Mark Applebaum percussion ensemble piece, which is a great piece, but kind of surprising while I'm watching television. So anyway, that's one of the I think downsides of that system of playing directly from the device is that it can be really hard to get back in and control it after you start playback.
So yeah, let me walk through this exactly how I would do it. So I almost never want to have the music coming directly from my phone for the reasons I stated earlier. So what I'll do is I'll go to Control Center, and then in the upper right corner of Control Center is whatever music is playing with a little play pause button. If I tap that square, I get some more controls, but then at the bottom of the screen is a little button called Control Other Speakers and TVs. So if I tap that, I can see what is the most recent thing or the current thing that is playing from every single HomePod and Apple TV in my house. Now, for me, let's say what I normally do is if I want music to AirPlay to all of the speakers in the house, I would go to, like, say, my dining room HomePod. And then when I tap on the dining room HomePod, it basically I'm still working with the Apple Music app as if I'm playing music on my phone, but all of the music that happens is actually streaming directly to whatever HomePod or Apple TV I had selected from the Control Center menu. So, and then from there, if you hit the AirPlay button too, the AirPlay 2 button at the bottom of the screen, then you can stream from that HomePod to other devices. Now, I like this, and when I go back to the music app, or if I'm, my phone is locked, but the lock screen is showing music controls, for a while, if I'm listening to music throughout the house, those lock screen and Control Center controls will manipulate the HomePod directly, not the stream of my iPhone. I have to go back into Control Center, tap the upper right square, hit Control Other Devices, and then select my iPhone to get back to my iPhone's audio output.
Right.
Unless I do something other than Apple Music. So if I'm running music on my dining room HomePod, the Apple Music app will be directly controlling that HomePod. But if I go to the YouTube app on my phone, then the YouTube music will come out of my phone speakers, and it'll reset my default lock screen controls to the phone. So it's just a little, it's awesome because all of it integrates together, but it is definitely cumbersome. Like, most people I know are like, no thanks, I'm just going to have my iPhone stream the music directly to my smart speakers everywhere.
And that's what I usually do. I will say, if you are an Amazon family and a Spotify family, Spotify Connect is a super cool thing that Spotify does, where it will connect everywhere that you have Spotify installed to one another. So you can, from any computer where you can run Spotify, be your Chromebook or whatever, it could be your iPad, it could be your phone, and it could be an Amazon Echo. You can put together groups of playback devices, and you can also control that from anywhere. So if you started playing Spotify on your Mac, you could tell it that you want that audio to go to any collection of other devices that also have the Spotify app installed, as then you can later be on your phone and open the Spotify app, and it will tell you that you've got Spotify Connect playing the same thing, and you can pause it from there. And as long as you're using the Spotify app, it all plays together very nicely.
So you're hitting at pretty much the core of the problem with Apple stuff, which is that and sort of earlier, what I said was the strength of the Google and the Amazon stuff is that the Google and Amazon stuff works better. It's better at linking into other third parties. Spotify is the perfect example of this, because Spotify, the way that they're working is Spotify is cloud first. Whatever device you're controlling the Spotify app from is just an interface for basically what's streaming from the internet. So it's not this hardware-centric attitude that Apple has. So for example, I can be in the Spotify app and do exactly what you just said. I can say, hey, hit the little send music to wherever speaker, and I can send Spotify streams directly to an Amazon Echo, to a Google device, or to a Sonos device. And what happens when I send it to one of those devices is that device, that Sonos or Amazon or whatever speaker, establishes a connection directly to Spotify and their service, and then I'm still seeing the Spotify app on my phone, but I'm not thinking about where is the music coming from. I'm just thinking about where do I want to be hearing it and what am I listening to, which is so crucial. And then you can even, if you do it with Sonos, which is great, you can say, hey, send to this Sonos speaker in my sunroom. Well, then if you go into the Sonos app, you can see it's not a flimsy or temporary connection like a Bluetooth connection is. The Sonos app, you can see, is now streaming directly from Spotify to Sonos to the speaker. You can see it in the app, and you can group some speakers with it. It's really, really well integrated. Another music service that I really love is called Adagio, which is a classical music streaming service, and they work exactly the same way. When you tap the stream this music to wherever button from within their app, Sonos and AirPlay are both selectable options. So I could AirPlay, to all of my speakers individually and then manipulate it from the control center. But the only way I can get Adagio to directly take their music stream and send it straight to my speakers without using my phone as the interface is to use, basically to select the Sonos as the output source. So it's just a very different approach. I think that Apple Music could really stand to be a more cloud-connected product. Like if it was not so weird to do all this stuff, because the control center and the lock screen are two great examples of Apple's walled garden, like, you know, their ecosystem working in your favor, making it easier to control your stuff. But it's just a real problem that you can only really stream Apple Music from an Apple device to another product.
Yeah, and I have been a Spotify person for many years, and only recently have been playing around with Apple Music because I subscribe to Apple One, where I get the Apple Music stuff included, and that's one of the frustrations there. Now, I do appreciate the AirPlay connections, but I can AirPlay from Spotify too, and it works very, very well.
Now that's working for you because you're basically taking your phones, you're streaming straight from the phone. So you're saying Spotify on my phone is sending its audio to these HomePods.
And if I know that it's likely that I'm going to be walking around, in my apartment building, I often, if I'm having friends over, have to go meet them in the lobby because you need a fob to get, it doesn't matter, but I have to go meet them. And so if I want to make sure that the music doesn't stop, I'll just start it from like my iPad or something like that instead of my phone. And it tends to work pretty well there. And then I will play it to a number of different HomePods and my Apple TV, which obviously doesn't have its own speakers, but I have nice speakers that I like connected to kind of a mostly analog playback system on my home entertainment system. And that's where my best speakers are, connected to my TV. So when I want to do listening, I will just turn on the TV and AirPlay to that, or plug something in, but usually just AirPlay.
That's a great workaround. Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up because my original Sonos Playbar we owned was not AirPlay 2 compatible, so I would have to basically AirPlay to my HomePod in one room, but then I would AirPlay to the living room TV in the other room, which, the same stream, and it would come through the Playbar because the Playbar was, as you said, hooked
and I
into
will
the
say,
TV.
There is a thing that is super buried in the Apple TV settings, but it's the thing that is fantastic. This is going to be my tip of the week. I'll have to come up with something better. If you go into the Apple TV settings and under audio and video, there's a calibration section. And the thing that you might want to do is AirPlay to your Apple TV with those speakers as well as other devices to have a group that plays back together. And one of the things that is great about that is that you can have music everywhere. And if you're only AirPlaying to smart speakers like a HomePod, they're going to be in sync. But because of the way televisions work and all sorts of other things, your Apple TV is likely to have a little bit more latency in playing things back than your Sonos or your HomePod or whatever other speakers you have would. And so the playback for AirPlay needs to be calibrated. And to do that, if you go into this and set the synchronization, it will basically ask you it will detect your phone nearby, and it will say, hold your phone up next to the TV speakers and hit go. And then it will play sound, and it will know then what the latency is from it trying to play the sound and your phone hearing the sound. And it will make an adjustment so that you can then play back your music or whatever to a group of speakers that can include whatever speakers are connected to your Apple TV, as well as the HomePod Mini, whatever Sonos things you have, whatever other AirPlay devices you have connected. So I do that a ton.
Yeah, I think it's an essential thing to turn on if you're using the HomePod and Apple TV kind of flow of things. I definitely recommend it. I will say that my Sonos speakers, for whatever reason, just do not require that fiddly step, and I do appreciate them for that. That they, even with the calibration on the Apple TV, I find that the Sonos speakers tend to, like when I'm operating them from within the Sonos app, not as AirPlay 2 destinations, they sound more in sync with each other. I don't feel as much like I'm walking from like one speaker to the next when I navigate the different rooms in my house, because there's just so, that part of that feeling and sensation comes from just that ever so slight bit of out of sync that things can be, where you just become more aware that you're listening to two different streams. Sonos has been pretty rock solid. I mean, I kind of want to get to a world where I am operating in the Apple ecosystem. I mean, because the next thing I want to talk about is Siri shortcuts. And, one really great way to automate music and make it as easy as possible to trigger is to use a shortcut. And I've got one that basically, like, you can, in the Shortcuts app, you can set up a home control scene, and you can say, hey, I want a scene. You set these up in the scenes themselves are set up in the Apple Home app, but then the shortcuts, which trigger the HomeKit automations, are set up in the Shortcuts app. So basically the scene is like set up in the Apple Home app, and you just basically say, like, what volume do you want the speakers to be? Which speakers do you want to play? What's the music stream? And again, because it's not internet connected, what it does is if you select AirPlay 2 speakers as the destination of audio, it'll pick a random HomePod and it'll play the stream directly from that, and then it'll stream that to your other AirPlay 2 speakers. What's funny is that if you choose no HomePods in the list of speaker options, like if you say, I want to listen to music on my Sonos this in the sunroom and my Sonos that in the living room, then what it'll do is when you run the scene, it'll play music still. It'll pick a random HomePod, play the music on that, but with the volume all the way on silent, and then stream to the devices that you actually did want it to send the stream to, but at whatever volume you have designated. It's just real janky. It's another reason why we need Apple Music in the cloud.
Right.
So it's great. Shortcuts are great because, you can like put a little widget on your lock screen, to the left, or just right directly on the main, your main page of apps, and you can have little hot buttons that do things like, I have one called I'm Awake, which turns on some light. It combines turning on some lights in the house with opening some blinds, and it plays a very specific morning playlist out of just the speakers that I will be near in the mornings. Mm-hmm. Then I've got Play Music Everywhere, which takes a playlist of my favorites that I've told, the music app or my favorites. It'll play that in all the speakers in the house. My problem is that, again, AirPlay 2 is just for some reason not rock solid for me, and I've noticed that when the home scene tries to run, if it runs into an issue with even just one of the speakers in my group, it'll cancel that whole part of the automation, which is super frustrating. Like if I say stream to these two Sonos speakers and this one HomePod, but one of the Sonos speakers doesn't cooperate, it just won't play any music.
Interesting. I don't use a ton of shortcuts like that. I have a bunch of scenes set up, and if all you want to do is to trigger a scene from your home, that doesn't require a shortcut. You can just ask the robot for a scene. So I have one called Good Morning, which turns my lights on and turns off a couple of other things in the apartment. And I just say, yo, Apple, good morning, and it does that. I don't want it to play audio though, so I can get away with that. In general, that's most of my automations like that. I have a few that are more than that, but not a lot. And I use for a couple of things, like when I'm leaving home, I have NFC tags that I use. I don't know if you've gotten into that world at all.
It's fun. Yep.
But that's another way to trigger a shortcut. And so if you don't want to talk to trigger your shortcut, you can get these little stickers on Amazon. They're like, I don't know, they're very cheap. They're less than $1 a piece. And you can stick them anywhere. And so I have one on the light switch next to my entrance door. And so I can tap that as I'm leaving to turn off everything everywhere in my apartment as I'm leaving. So all I do is hold my phone up to this thing, and it turns off all of the lights and the fan and the whatever else is on in my apartment, turns it off as I'm leaving home. And so, those are fun to play around with, and those you can set up very easily in shortcuts. But most of my home automation stuff is just done in the Home app.
This is a weird analogy, maybe, but people will understand it. Like someone once at a conference session I was giving on Sibelius asked me, like, do you prefer to input notes with your keyboard and mouse or a MIDI controller? Computer keyboard, mouse, or MIDI controller. And I'm like whatever's under my fingers is what I want to do. I want all the methods of entry that I can have, so that whatever, so that the sooner as, my brain can send something to my hands, can send something to the machine, the better. And it's like sometimes I want to call out into the air because my hands are full. Sometimes my phone is in my hand and I want to just hold it up to a sticker that's sticking on the wall. Sometimes I'm on the couch and my phone is already, I'm like fooling around on my phone, so I want to open up the home app and tap on a button to trigger something. Like, the more the merrier.
That's awesome. It's funny that you mentioned that. We recently recorded an episode of Scoring Notes that I think will probably be out before this episode of Music Ed Tech Talk comes out, that's just on getting notes into notation applications and all of the ways to do that.
So yeah, everyone definitely go listen to that. Anyone who's not subscribed to the Scoring Notes podcast and blog should be, so do that. All right.
So I want to know what the actual things that you're using to do your home controlling is. I've gone through a few phases of how I want to control the appliances in my home. I've still got a few Wemo switches from Belkin lying around. I'm trying to slowly phase those out, because they made a change recently that kind of blew up all my Wemo stuff, and I would like something more stable. But anyway, I have some Wemo switches that control things like a fan in my bedroom or the cat fountain that I have in the living room. And I've got those. I've gone through a few iterations of smart light bulbs. At one point, I wanted to do everything through these smart plugs, these Wemo. I should say, if you're not familiar with a Wemo switch, it's called a Wemo switch, but what it actually is like a little plug wart thing that sticks on top of your outlet, and that can allow you to turn whatever you plug into it on and off remotely. You can get Wemo light switches, which are wall switches, but the Wemo switch is just a smart plug. And so anyway, I used to use those for all of my light control stuff, and I thought, the colored lights are like a dumb fad. Nobody wants colored lights. And then I got some colored lights, and they're pretty fun. So I currently have a few left over from the first round of experiments that I did with colored lights, and those are a company called VocoLink, which is probably like the most cost-effective way to get a Apple HomeKit compatible smart bulb. Their app is terrible, but you can control these bulbs from HomeKit, which is pretty cool. The thing that I'm using now, though, that I'm trying to replace all of my remaining bulbs with, are from Nanoleaf, which is this company that makes these very cool flat colored light panel things that you can put in different arrangements on your wall. The panels look awesome. I don't own any because they're somewhat costly, and I can't justify spending $300 on like some interesting triangles on my wall. Though they would be very interesting, and I would have a great time playing with them.
Of course.
I really want them. If anybody wants to buy me a Christmas present for $300, you should get me some Nanoleaf panels. But anyway, the thing that I have now, they recently started producing just regular old, A19 socket light bulbs and some light panels or some light strips, I guess. And those are great. And the reason that I really like them is they play very nicely with HomeKit, but also they have Thread radios, which is this. So Thread is a wireless technology like Wi-Fi or Bluetooth, and I think it actually uses the same radio frequencies as Wi-Fi, but it creates its own mesh network across a whole bunch of different devices, and it requires you to have a Thread hub, but a lot of things have Thread hubs built into them already, including the HomePod Mini. And so I have these HomePod Minis that speak like instantly to the light bulbs that I have sitting around, these Nanoleaf light bulbs. And the Nanoleaf light bulbs, unlike the Philips Hue bulbs, are only like $20 and don't require a hub, anything more than the hub that I already have built into the HomePod Mini. It's not in the big HomePod, but that's fine because you can't buy the big HomePod anymore anyway. But I really like them. It's super fast. Now, the downside is if I ask the Apple robot to turn on or off or change the color of any of these Nanoleaf lights, if I do it and it's heard by one of my HomePod Minis and responded to from the HomePod Mini, it works almost every single time. If it is heard by like my watch. If I say, "Yo, Apple, turn off the studio lights," that there's like a, maybe a 40% chance that it'll work if my watch hears it, and my phone is somewhere in between. But so I find myself doing this stupid thing where I will like make sure that my phone is off and that I'm like covering up the microphone with my phone before I ask for the Apple robot to do anything, because I know if my HomePod hears it, it's going to work and it's going to be great and it's going to be instant. It's super fast. That's the other thing, is that when the HomePod hears it, it's instant. And even when I was using like the Wemo stuff, which would work most of the time as well, there was always like a 3 or 4 second delay, and you're not quite sure if it's going to work or not, and so you start to do it again. It's very annoying.
Yeah, well,
but the thread is like instant. I really dig it.
There's like that again, the reliability of Siri sometimes does get in the way, and I've noticed there's like, this is one of those things again where Apple's device and hardware centric focus gets in the way a little bit. Like the Apple devices are much better at knowing which one you intend to talk to than the Amazon or the Google. Like if I sometimes tell my dining room Google to do something on the TV, I'll notice that it'll pop up on the living room TV, which has a Chromecast built into it. Like, I'm sure I could turn off that somewhere in the settings, but it's like it has no idea that you're talking to just one thing. Whereas Apple does, but because Siri is not a service, it's more like an integrated part of each hardware product. It's capable of different things on different Apple products, which is super frustrating because there's this hierarchy. If you're wearing AirPods that are connected to an iPhone, and then you have an iPad 10 feet away, and then there's a HomePod 20 feet away, do you know what order of operations Siri will interpret you from? Have you ever tested it before?
I do not.
Okay, so it'll go AirPods will be the first thing. I guess it just assumes that's on your body. So you
oh,
must be...
right. Yeah.
So,
that's another annoying thing. I've taken AirPods out to request things from
yes.
from Siri before because it's so bad.
Yeah. So like TV Siri can like, and this is changing with the next tvOS update, which I'm really looking forward to, but like TV Siri is the only one where you can like request a specific show and episode be played on your Apple TV. Only the watch has like certain health related things that only it can do. The iPhone tends to be like the most comprehensive, but sometimes like the HomePod will hang up on like personal requests, like do I have email or are there any events in my calendar today? But basically the hierarchy is AirPods, HomePods if they're within listening distance, and then whatever actual hardware device is just sitting out. And it's super frustrating. Yeah, like you're saying, like if the thing that catches your voice is not capable of the request that you have made, it does not have any smarts to pass it on to any of the many. It's like I've got so many of you in my house connected by the internet. Like why can't you just, if you're going to remain hardware connected, like just figure it out. Just figure it out.
Well, so one of the things we're recording this about 3 weeks after Apple's Worldwide Developers Conference, and I know you've already had an episode discussing everything that happened at WWDC, but one of the things that they did say is that Siri voice processing will, with iOS 15 and iPadOS 15, happen on device. So if it fails, it will fail faster now because it doesn't have to ask the cloud if it can do a thing. It can just know right away. And hopefully that will eventually open it up to know instantly which device should be the one that takes care of certain requests, right? Because it should be able to negotiate that locally.
Well, and they announced another thing too. Speaking about speakers, they they're going to allow third-party home products to have Siri integration, and the way that that's going to work is because Apple's super concerned about privacy. Is you'll need a HomePod in the house, and so it's feasible that. Because I haven't like really overviewed like what I've talked about, why I dabble in all these different ecosystems. I haven't actually like outright stated how I really listen to my music 99% of the time. Like one of the reasons I have these different things is because some of them have like little nice things. Like I do like that I can Chromecast to my Google thing. I do like that my Amazon can order stuff from Amazon.com. I do like that even though the HomePods and AirPlay 2 fail me a lot, I do like that. Because Siri is my main assistant that I'm used to using on my phone, I do like that it can hear me in most of the rooms of my house because I got some HomePod minis kind of scattered about. So the idea that my preferred speaker, which is the Sonos, that's what I am usually listening to music out of. The idea that they could potentially do an update or make a speaker product where it could receive the Siri command and then it could send that to a HomePod somewhere in the house. That's exciting because then I honestly like if now Sonos has already said that they're like not thrilled that Apple is doing that because it's like anti-competitive, and we don't need to get into that now. But I honestly like if Sonos added that feature, because Sonos can also be a Google Assistant or an Echo. This is part of the reason why I am able to have such widespread coverage for all three assistants in my house, is because I program the Sonos speakers to be Amazon or Google depending on which room I want that assistant in. But the fact that it could also receive a Siri command means that I would just ditch all of my, I would probably sell all of my HomePods, because the HomePods for me at this point are basically just Siri receivers. Like they're, other than the old big one that I have in our sunroom, I don't really like do a ton of music listening on them. So I could potentially be excited by that feature. We'll see if they play nice.
I still really like them as so I don't have a Sonos thing to fall back on. I still like them as AirPlay 2 speakers and as my Thread hubs. The other cool thing about Thread is that it's a mesh, so you can, if one Wi-Fi hotspot is not going to cover your whole house, then you can have a couple of 3 or 4 different HomePod minis spread out, and they can all negotiate that network among one another, which is pretty cool.
Right,
I have a small apartment; it's not an issue. But if you have a larger home, that can be another useful thing for you.
Sure. Yeah. Let me, because you were opening things up more broadly to like smart home accessories. I want to go there, but let me just close a couple of closing. It's like speaker related, I don't know if they're mini topics, just like little tidbits here. So I was remarking earlier how I do my preferred way to like tap, on my phone and get music really quickly playing out of speakers is through shortcuts. I use the shortcuts widget on my home screen, and I have a couple of home automation and like speaker related shortcuts that are just a tap away. Because of that AirPlay 2 connection, I've started using Sonos and the Sonos app more regularly to manipulate my music. And there's a really great app called Soro that is basically adds Siri shortcut support to your Sonos speakers. And because Sonos is really open and internet connected like Spotify, they're able to expose lots of APIs that basically this Soro shortcuts app is basically to be able, anything that Sonos has allowed them to hook into, they have a shortcut for. So you can say, hey, group these speakers together can be a SEP. Or you can say, play specifically this playlist in my Sonos library. And that's been a really good way to get the benefit of the Siri shortcuts, but also to have the Sonos sort of be managing the speaker relationship. The Amazon and the Google products can, like I said, they can be grouped to Sonos speakers because their home apps are able to recognize them. You can do like some interesting things, like you can have a Google Nest Hub play music out of a Sonos speaker by default. So if you want to tell the Google thing, play music in this room, but you want the Sonos that's 10 feet away to be the actual output, you can do that. Echo and Google Nest stuff all can integrate with Apple Music. So if you are kind of in the Apple ecosystem, you use Apple Music, but you want to buy all Amazon products for your smart speakers, you can still have them play Apple Music. What is this note here? So I mean, I guess the general, in conclusion, my workflow is use AirPlay 2 and Siri shortcuts when possible. When I fail, use Sonos. And I have a record player too that I've been really digging lately. Have we talked about this?
No, but I'm definitely going to make fun of you for it.
You absolutely should make fun of me for it. And I can, in the last episode, I defended my interest of recently, like sort of expanding my vinyl collection, and I can take that record player and it's plugged into the back of one of my Sonos, so it is like integrated. I can be like grilling outside with a little Bluetooth, not Bluetooth enabled, but like one of the, they make a couple of portable things. I can have my little portable Sonos outside. I can be grilling. And yesterday I was listening to this recording of like the London Symphony doing Mahler 3. It was just spinning.
And you're doing that through the wireless like unit that is outside connected to your turntable, which is inside?
Yeah, it's called a Sonos Move. It's a speaker that, when docked, just is a basic Sonos speaker. But when you take it outside, it can, as long as it's connected to your Wi-Fi, it can run a Sonos stream. It still is Amazon Echo connected and AirPlay 2 compatible, even when it's, detached. So it's Amazon Echo and Google voice assistant compatible. It's AirPlay 2 compatible. It sounds great. It's portable. And when you take it on the road, you hit a button on the back of it and it becomes a Bluetooth speaker. So you don't even need an internet connection at all.
So is this recording of Mahler 3 that you're listening to, is this available like anywhere to stream or purchase digitally, or this performance is only available on vinyl? Because so I'm compelled to point out that if the recording ever touches digital world, it stays digital. Like, you can't go back. So when you are airplaying it or whatever wireless technology you're using to get it out to the speaker where you're actually sitting, it is no longer getting whatever analog voodoo you were getting from the turntable by the time it gets to your wireless speaker outside. It should sound basically identical to, in fact, it's probably less good than a high quality digital stream of the same recording.
Yeah, I mean, no one is listening to vinyl. Well, some people think they're listening to vinyl because of the quality of the sound, but no one actually is. So I have my own reasons for being into this right now, which I in part defended on the last episode. But we can go at it. I mean,
is this the mindful tea ceremony thing? Because that I totally get.
Yeah, I mean, well, so that's definitely an element at play. You're talking about like
the idea of going through the ritual of setting up the turntable and selecting the album and placing it on the turntable, it like brings focus to your listening, and that I totally get.
Yeah, I think it's
that.
Yes.
I'm not ever going to attack the idea of a ritual bringing you into this place of focused, mindful listening.
Yeah, that
I think is what the best thing turntables are for.
Yeah, I think it is too. And I would argue maybe also that if someone is like into collecting, that it sort of brings a similar mindfulness into the process of supporting the people who make the music. The last time I bought vinyl, I felt like I was like, wow, I haven't felt this idea of like actually thinking about what my, first of all, like how I value my money and who I want to support. I haven't thought about this since like I was still buying CDs, which is like, it feels ages ago. And then I'm finding things that I'm like, that seem interesting that I've never heard of. Like I found that there's this live Miles Davis record the last time I was shopping, and I was like, why haven't I heard of this? And I looked it up and I'm like, oh, it's kind of a flop, but I'm kind of intrigued to know that, this album exists and that Miles Davis was performing, at this time, at this place. So
now that you have this show and blog on Patreon, and the last time I was on your show, my pick, I think it was the last time I was on your show, was Scary Pockets on YouTube. Scary Pockets is doing a very cool thing. They release a new song every week, which is, as they point out in some of their videos, a lot. But what they do is every time they get to, I think, 10 songs, they will package all 10 of those songs up and send them out to their Patreon supporters on vinyl, which is pretty cool. So speaking of like, this kind of physical manifestation of your support of an artist is pretty cool as a collecting thing, and also supporting people who make things that you like. So it's like that's another cool benefit of vinyl, is that it is not only a physical manifestation of your love of a person and support of a person, it's also just a cool object.
I agree totally. Yeah, and it's like, you go to the show and you don't like any of the t-shirts, it's like, why not buy the vinyl, and I can actually like engage with this in a meaningful way. Totally. You get it. Yeah, but we definitely.
I don't know. I just don't need any more stuff in my life.
I totally get it. I have dueling. Like on the one hand, it's like we're talking right now about all of the stuff that is electronic and in a home. Yet at the same time, there's like a simplicity towards like automating and managing it so that it works for you. So there's like, I feel like you're capturing this sort of duality of like simplicity and complexity. I mean, if anything, my smart speaker setup is definitely a battle between these two ideas. It's like, how do I make it easier for me, but also like I sometimes make it easier for me by introducing more things into the equation. And
sure,
that's sort of like maybe a good conclusion is hopefully I explained enough about this topic that someone who wants to go to those extremes feels more empowered to do so, or hopefully you were so scared by all the weird quirks and bugs that I described that you're just gonna like commit to one ecosystem and buy a couple of smart smart people in a cans to place around your house. And those are all those are all pretty valid ways to do it, I think.
At the risk of stretching this any farther, do you have a way of controlling your smart home stuff from your Mac? Do you have stuff connected with your Stream Deck?
You are at the risk of taking that to Galaxy Brain. Should we?
We don't have to if you don't want to. Because I have some Stream Deck things that I use for that.
Okay, let's put it in the.
Okay.
Let's do it in the after show. Now that I have a Patreon and some because one of my Patreon tiers is called Backstage Access, and I do a bootleg podcast episode. So if you really like this show a lot, and you want to hear extended conversation by us and like a quicker, faster, unedited version of this conversation, you can certainly check it out there, because I feel like the things we're going to talk about in the after show are like extremely nerdy. We're going to talk about we're going to talk about FileMaker, publishing FileMaker databases to the web, using Apple Notes. Can I do some follow-up, though? Speaking of after show, follow-up's supposed to go in the beginning, I think, but I forgot it. So in the last episode, which some people have heard and some people have not heard, for that very reason that there is a bootleg version already published of my very, very excellent interview with Alex Shapiro, composer, who is amazing and inspiring and a lovely human being. We talked about her app of the week was one of them anyway, was the game Spell Tower, which is great. And I commented that that developer has lots of great games in the App Store. And then a listener told me that, in fact, they are all on Apple Arcade. So if someone subscribes to just Apple Arcade, or you do that Apple One bundle, which you're doing, that comes included, that comes packaged with all of the Apple Arcade games, then you have all of these games. Is it Gage? Zach Gage?
Zach Gage.
Yeah, he's the one who develops Spell Tower and many, many other great games. They're amongst my favorites for mobile, so worth checking out. All right, let's do app, album, and tech tip of the week.
All right. So my app of the week, I will recommend a game as well that I've been playing quite a bit recently. This is another word game. This is an long time iOS, and in fact also on Android now, app that I have been playing with some of my colleagues a lot lately, called Letterpress. Have you ever played Letterpress, Robby?
I love Letterpress. It's great.
So one of my colleagues invited me to play a word game with them, and it's one of these games that you play on Facebook, and I said I'm not playing a game on Facebook. I don't need to spend any more time there. It's not a good idea. But if you want to play a word game with me, you should check out Letterpress. And so now this person and I usually have between 3 and 5 Letterpress games running at the same time, and we've started to get some of our other colleagues into it. So if you're not familiar, Letterpress is the board looks like Boggle. It's a 5x5 letter grid, but the similarities kind of end there. And I'm not even really sure how to explain it, because I don't know any other games that work this way. But it's about constructing words, and you're competing directly with another person. You can play against the computer, you can play against randos on the internet, or you can play against your friends, which is clearly the best way to play any game. So you should definitely check out Letterpress. It is free to download, and it costs like $3 or $4 to remove the ads, which you should always do that. If you like a thing and it only costs $3 or $4 to remove the ads. So anyway, that is my app of the week.
That's a good one. I'm going to stay really on topic today and choose Home Run 2 as my app of the week, which is a home automation app. So here's the thing is apps on the iPhone can have access to the Apple Home app and all of the scenes and accessories within it. So if you really don't like the Apple Home app's interface, you can use third-party app or a supplemental app like Home Run 2. And basically what it does is the new version has widget support, so you can have some scenes, some tappable triggers for scenes like your Good Morning scene or mine or my Play Music Everywhere scene. You can basically just have hot buttons living directly on your home screen. But you can do things like customize the shape of the buttons, the image on the buttons, the color of the buttons, where they're laid out, like lots and lots of things. But what I really like, and this has been around since the first version of Home Run, is that you can have a little complication on your watch, basically, that either launches the app to a grid of your most frequently used scenes. And this is actually important because the Apple Watch Home app only shows, like, the buttons are so big that you can only really see one on the screen at a time. So you're like, if you want to find a certain scene, you're like scrolling through this endless list of giant blocks, whereas you can fit about 9 or 10 triggers into the Home Run app at once. So it's like you tap the complication to launch you into some triggers, and then, you know, you've got a grid of like your 9 or 10 most. It's like just a lot less fiddly, and I like it. You can even take it a step further. You can program the watch complication to launch a scene of your choice by time of day. So you can say, instead of opening the app from 6 a.m. to 8 a.m., have a one-touch button that launches my Good Morning scene. And then from 8 a.m. to 12 p.m., have a one-tap button straight from my watch face that will, like, you know, open the garage door and, like, you know, change the, basically like a getting ready to leave for work kind of a scene. At night, you know, have like my movie time scene be right there. So you can really, really heavily customize it in a cool way. And I like it.
Have you played around with WatchSmith at all? I have not done this, but I'm led to understand that it will let you do some of those similar kinds of things.
Yeah, so it's the idea is that it's exactly what I just described about the complications on your watch face that change based on time parameters you set up. The problem for me is just that while WatchSmith is more heavily customizable because it accesses almost all of the data that an iPhone will let you access, like you can look at your calendar, your reminders, the weather, like it can integrate with all these different things. But I just don't really personally like the look of any of the complications. So I've never really put one on my watch face. But yeah, that's the general idea. I know that WatchSmith came up in my episode where Katie Wardrobe was on because we were talking about widgets. Mm-hmm. And, you know, the same developer has, you know, Widgetsmith, right. Yeah. And that is for making custom widgets, and that app blew up over the last year. What I don't know, and what I would be super intrigued to know, is can you program the widget, like the same widget, to look different or show different data based on time of day?
Well, I'm pretty sure you can do that in Widgetsmith. I have not done it, but I'm pretty sure you can.
Yeah, that would make sense. And, you know, there's this new feature that I talked about 2 episodes ago with Craig where you can, like, kind of trigger these, like, different variations of Do Not Disturb on your devices that you can program to not only to, like, they all can sort of, like, have different notification settings. Like, your work Do Not Disturb mode will not show you, you know, like Twitter messages or something. But these different Do Not Disturbs that are coming in the next version of iOS can also basically have custom home screens associated with them. So you could do this without something like Widgetsmith. You could say, hey, when I'm in work focus mode, show me just a dashboard of productivity apps, to-do list, calendar. When I'm in podcast recording mode, or I've been thinking of setting up a band rehearsal mode that, like, puts some tuning and some rhythm apps on my home screen and, like, takes away all distracting, you know, iMessage notifications. So you'll be able to go to town with that in a couple months.
Yeah, I'm very much looking forward to that. And I think you are able to trigger those focus modes from a shortcut. So you could have that triggered by the time of day, or you could have it triggered by one of those NFC stickers that we were talking about earlier, or you could maybe even, you know, connect it to opening a particular app. So, you know, when you open Fourscore, when you open Tonal Energy, it will assume that it is time for this other stuff and then change everything over.
I like that. I hadn't thought about the opening a music-related app being the trigger that tells my phone what I'm doing. But yes, that sounds great. Very cool.
Certainly, at least, you know, turning off your notifications and everything so you don't get random text messages showing up on your screen.
Yeah. I like that. I mean, you could even set it up to, like, prompt you. Like, you open Tonal Energy and it's like, hey, are you in band rehearsal? And then you choose yes, and then it, like, does some magic. Yeah, I like that.
Yeah.
Very cool. My album of the week is the new Hiatus Kaiyote album. Have you heard it?
Not.
They're a delight. Are you into them at all?
No.
Yeah, they're...
How would you describe their music?
I would like to describe their music the way that they describe their music. And hold on, I want to read it in their words. I'll Google it. Here we go. Multi-dimensional polyrhythmic gangster.
All right. I'm here for that.
Yeah. So they are. I guess I would put him in the neo soul category, but like pretty progressive, lots of texture, lots of color, lots of grooves that swing in various ways that where you're not really able to. Everything is like kind of straight ahead and danceable for the most part, but like the way that they kind of subdivide the beat and like superimpose each other's rhythms, they just have like a really flexible sense of time. They're pretty popular. Like they've been sampled by a lot of other neo soul and hip hop artists who I think kind of work. They're sort of like adjacent to that whole area. I've seen them live. They're great. They're great live. They reproduce it all really well. They got a little bit of like an electronic sound, but they're not
doing that stuff live is really hard.
It is really hard. Super hard, yeah. And they're like pretty. They got a lot of electronics they use, but not a ton of the live performance was like using sequencers or anything. Like they have some sequencing stuff, but it's still a pretty like lively and organic feel to the live performance. Yeah, the music is real catchy. And to some will think it's like weird, a little out there and weird, but it does. Like when the singing style is sort of like rooted in like rhythm and blues, it sort of like grounds the rest of the wacky instrumental stuff to like it's kind of like listening to, I guess, an adjacent artist you might consider to be like Thundercat or someone who is like kind of nonstop like riffing highly technical like jazz lines on his bass over top like pretty much the duration of most songs, but like all of his choruses are super hooky and he sings in this like falsetto range that is just like kind of grips you and catches you. So like there's like an anchor to the chaos, I think.
Right. So that sounds pretty cool. I'll have to check that out. So my album of the week, and I just decided this morning as we are recording. So we are recording this on the morning that the world has learned that one of the great composers of the 20th and 21st century, that at least I shouldn't say that, one of my favorite composers, I'll put it that way, of the 20th and 21st century has passed away this morning, Frederic Rzewski, and his name is very strangely spelled Rzewski, if you are curious, but he was just a phenomenal composer, kind of postmodern pastiche in very creative ways, brought in influences from all sorts of things. Another thing that he's well known for is writing instrumental music that deals with complicated social issues and political issues. He was, a very vocal socialist and wrote music about socialism. And there are a number of great pieces of his. He was also a pianist and performed a lot of his own works until just the last few years. He died this morning at age, I think, 91. But he still was writing and performing, at least writing up through 2021, and performing probably until right before the pandemic. Was so tons of really cool piano music. I think his best known work is the one that I'm going to recommend in case folks listening to this are not familiar with Rzewski's work. It's a piece. It's a concert-length work, so it's about an hour long for unaccompanied piano. It's called "The People United Will Never Be Defeated!" ! And it is a set of 36 variations on an Argentinian socialist song of the same name. And the variations are very cool. They start off kind of like a typical kind of 19th century virtuoso theme and variations kind of thing, and then gradually diverge into weirder and weirder things. There are some that are kind of bluesy. He sometimes brings in themes from other socialist movements around the world, which is kind of interesting. Each variation, I should say there are 36 variations. Every sixth variation is a summary of the previous five. Which is kind of cool. And then the 36th variation is a summary of all of the previous variations. And it's just really cool. There's this amazing recording by Ursula Oppens. There are a number of really good recordings of this piece. It was, I think he wrote it in the early 1970s. So it's had plenty of time to get a lot of really good recordings. But I think Ursula Oppens, a really good recent one, So if you're interested in listening to some really cool music from the last several decades, definitely check that out. There's another really great piece from the 90s of his called De Profundis, which is for, I think he describes it as for theatrical pianist. So the pianist is asked to speak and hum and whistle and do all kinds of other things at the piano. And it uses as its text a letter that Oscar Wilde wrote while in prison for being gay in the 1800s. So it's a very, very cool piece, very interesting. Again, deals with a lot of complicated social and political issues. So definitely check out the music of Frederic Rzewski if you've never heard it before. It's pretty badass.
Yeah, I'll put a bunch of links to some things in the notes. Who was the pianist again? You said has the recording you like?
Ursula Oppens. Ursula Oppens.
I'll link that in. Have you heard the Igor Levit version? That's the one I'm most familiar with.
I think so, but it's probably been a while. There's another, I think it's Kai Schumacher has another really good one. And the thing that I like about his is that the bluesy variation feels very groovy and bluesy. That's
good. Yeah. More than one or two recordings that I have listened to pair it with a bunch of Bach. Do you have any?
I don't know why that would be, unless it's just that it's a giant theme and variations, and so they want to pair it with the Goldberg variations, would be my guess.
Yeah.
That would be my guess. He wrote a number of really cool piano pieces. Another really awesome one that I love is For North American Ballads, has this great movement called Winnsboro Cotton Mill Blues that does some cool like percussive effect kinds of things at the piano with clusters, where you're kind of like playing the contour but using these of the tune. It's kind of a theme and variations type thing as well, but you're playing the contour of the tune in clusters, and then the tune kind of slowly comes into focus. Anyway, it's super cool.
Awesome. All right. Well, I'll link all that in the notes. Tip. All right. Mine is Clipboard Manager. Use one. I didn't for so long. You'll be shocked. For years and years and years, I've used a Mac app.
Really?
For years, I've used a Mac app called Alfred, which is like kind of it's like a replacement for the Mac OS Spotlight, where it can find your apps and your files real quick by just triggering a keyboard command and then typing in the thing you're looking for. But like many replacements for Spotlight that exist, and many of them do, it sort of like adds a bunch of features, but also can sort of smartly know what you're looking for by, like, if I type in the keyboard shortcut and then I type in like the letter P, but I open the app Pages a lot, it'll like prioritize Pages will like rise to the top hit over time. But what it also does is it has like a bunch of extra features, and one of them is a clipboard manager, which basically saves. I can't tell you how many times I'm like just fiddling with Command C and Command V, when in reality, most of the time, the thing that I want to copy, I actually had already copied earlier in the same work session. So it's just you do a keyboard shortcut. Mine is Control Command C, pulls up the Alfred interface, but it shows me a list of everything I've copied, and it handles everything. It doesn't just handle copying of text, it handles images, links, rich text, HTML, images, files, like anything that has been copied to my clipboard, it has a history of them, and all I need to do is choose the one I want, because sometimes I don't want to copy the most recent thing, or I don't want to paste the most recent thing I've copied. It's like 3 or 4 down the list, and it's just a great way to not be as fiddly.
Yeah, I use the Alfred Clipboard Manager as well, and I use Command Option V. Will pull up the list of all the things that I might want to paste. Do you use the thing where it will automatically append the thing that you've selected to the most recent clipboard selection? Have you tried this before?
No, tell me more.
So this is a setting in Alfred. So if you select a thing and hit Command C, it'll copy it to your clipboard. But then if you select another thing and double tap Command C, so you hold Command and tap C twice, if it's on, it will make a little chirp noise so you know it worked. And what it will then do is append the thing that you have just copied to the last thing on your clipboard. So you can kind of like put together this Frankenstein string of texts. And if you're paying attention to where you're going, you can put together some stuff and save yourself a bunch of back and forth. I think most of the time I still would rather just see it and copy the things out of my clipboard one at a time, but appending things to the clipboard can be pretty powerful. My tip of the week, I mentioned earlier, was going to be the thing in the Apple TV settings where you can set up the synchronization for your AirPlay audio with other devices. So what I'm going to say instead for a tip of the week is if you are a Stream Deck user, you should update to the newest Stream Deck 5.0 on the Mac or Windows. And there is a new, what they are calling, store of these Stream Deck plugins. You don't pay for any of them yet, though it would be very interesting if they would allow people to pay for things in the Stream Deck store, because there are places where you can go to buy Stream Deck setups. So anyway, this Stream Deck store thing has a new item in it that is called, I believe it's called Audio Mute. And Audio Mute will let you put a button on your Stream Deck that is a general mute switch for whatever microphone input you have connected. So right now, Robby and I are recording this on Zoom to talk to each other, but we're recording locally. So I have Audio Hijack running on the side that is recording my audio that I'll send to Robby later. So it's recorded locally and doesn't have to deal with whatever Zoom is going to do to it, whatever the network is going to do to it. This button will let me mute my audio, not just in Zoom, but mute the input from my microphone to wherever, which is super cool. This is a thing that I really wanted to be able to do during this past year in school. When I would play an audio example, I would want to mute my microphone coming in, but not the audio that I was playing from like Spotify or whatever. And there was not a great way to do that, but this would have let me do that because it will let me toggle the volume level of any input device, which is super, super cool. So, and you can set it to any device that the Mac operating system can control the volume of. So you may not be able to control every audio interface with this thing, but if you use any kind of virtual audio devices like Loopback, you can control it there. So I have one Loopback device that brings in all of my external audio sources, whether I'm using this microphone that I'm talking to you on for a podcast, or whether I'm using the built-in microphone in my iMac, or whether indeed I am using this like fancy wireless lavalier system that I sometimes use for teaching class. They're all connected to one external audio in virtual device and Loopback, and that's the thing that I have this button controlling on my Stream Deck, so that I could play an audio example from Spotify or Apple Music or Farrago or whatever, and while that's playing, mute this microphone so that if I, take a sip of coffee, you don't hear my gross like mouth sounds or whatever while the audio is playing. So anyway, that is the pick. Update Stream Deck 5.0 for your software and download the audio mute integration or whatever it calls them.
I would use something like that all the time. I'm going to check that out. It's for
great.
Sure.
Now, I will say, here's the thing with a lot of stuff like Zoom, is if your audio level goes down to 0 on the input, Zoom might like freak out and try to like adjust your audio levels. So make sure that you've got whatever Zoom is going to do to try to quote unquote correct your audio levels. Make sure you've got that all turned off if you're going to do something like this, because Zoom understands when it gets muted. It doesn't understand when the input source goes down to 0.
Gotcha. Okay, interesting. Yeah. So if anyone doesn't know what Loopback is, by the way, I would like to refer you to the episode of this show where I interviewed the CEO of Rogue Amoeba, who develops that and many great audio apps, super integral during the pandemic. Paul Kafasis was the guest on that episode. And I also talk a little bit about how I use it in a much more concise way than I'm used to doing, where I go off the rails on this show. I was actually, and this is a piece of follow-up that I forgot, but I was a guest on the Music First podcast, teaching profiles and teaching with technology is sort of the subtitle. So that's the Music First podcast. Dr. Jim Frankel hosts that. He had me on to talk kind of just like broadly about my teaching career and how I'm using technology in the music classroom normally, and also this past year during COVID. So that was like a real fun conversation to have. So yeah, and Loopback is like one of the things that we talk about. So if you're looking for a little bit like less in the weeds, but like still a more concise description of what that is. Those are 2 podcast episodes maybe you want to listen to. All right, cool. I have to go. I think my child is going to wake up pretty soon.
That's probably safe bet.
This has been fun though.
Yeah, this was fun.
Thanks for letting me just being sort of a sounding board and for this smart speaker topic. It's been.
Sounds like it's been something that's been on your mind for a little while.
For a long time. And I knew you helped me to make sure that I hit all the things I wanted to. I had an outline, but I didn't know like the right way to go through it. And it made it so much easier to just have a conversation rather than just read a thing. So
you had a very clear outline here in this Apple note that you sent me. It says Robby goes off on speakers and assistants. What more do you need? I'm Robby Burns. Thanks for listening to Music Ed Tech Talk. You can find the show's page, show notes for the episode, and my blog at musicedtechtalk.com. You can subscribe to the blog posts through an RSS app of your choice, and you can subscribe to the podcast in the podcast app of your choice. You can also get both blog posts and podcast episodes delivered right into your email inbox once a week from my website. Please rate and review the show in the Apple Podcasts app. It absolutely helps. It'll take just 1 second and a few taps. Word of mouth is helpful too, so please spread the word about the show if you're enjoying it. You can now support the show on Patreon. You can check that out at patreon.com/musicedtechtalk or by clicking the link in the show notes to this episode. There's 4 tiers of support. Every single one of them includes an invitation to my Music Ed Tech Talk Discord server, where you can join the community of other listeners and past guests to talk about music, education, technology, lesson ideas, pedagogy, hardware, apps, software, all of the things that you would want to talk about. David is in that Discord, and we have a good time.
Yeah, we've been having a lot of fun being nerds about lots of adjacent topics to music, education, and technology. Other tiers include things like getting to join me on monthly Zoom calls during my live streams, things like getting some of my teaching resources like my scale, exercise, play-along tracks. Higher tiers include things like consulting meetings with me, sponsorship for the website, and one of the tiers includes a bootleg version of this episode where you can get extended and unedited conversation. We're about to record that now. We're going to talk about a couple fun things in just a second here. So if you're interested in that, you can find out more there. Until next time, see you soon.